Hello everyone, and a very, very warm welcome to the SEO Mindset podcast, where your hosts are myself, Sarah McDowell, and the ever so fabulous Tazmin Suleman, with episodes going out every single Thursday. This week, I have a cracking guest for you all, and my guest is Shola Kaye. Now, I first saw Shola when I attended WTS Fest back in February this year. Shola was the keynote speaker, and after seeing her doing her talk, I instantly spoke to Tazmin and was like, we need Shola on the podcast. Now, I invited her to join me on the podcast to talk about the art and power of the ask. And it was a cracking conversation. I very much enjoyed myself. And we cover so much on the podcast. So I asked Shola for her to share situations where she wished that she asked questions, and in those specific situations, what are the questions that she wished she asked and why. We also cover sort of common reasons why people shy away from asking questions, and we also get into practical strategies to deal with not getting the answer that you want, because of course when we are asking more and putting ourselves out there, we are opening ourselves up to rejection. So we have a conversation about how to deal with those situations. It's a great episode and I can't wait to play it for you all. Before I do, just a reminder of how you can support the podcast. So if you enjoy what me and Tazmin are doing, why not give us a one-off donation? We are set up on Buy Me a Coffee. Link in the show notes to do that. And please, please, please help spread the word of the podcast. Word of mouth is still one of the best ways to grow podcast listeners and visibility and all that lovely stuff. So the next time you're listening to an episode and you know someone who would very much enjoy, very much get a lot out of the podcast episode, why not share it to them? Find the link and open up WhatsApp, whatever messenger service you're using, and send them a link. We'd be ever so appreciative of that. Right then. Are you ready for this week's episode? Of course you are. So let's get cracking. Hello, Shola, and welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Sarah. Great to be with you today.
Great to be with you too. And I am loving the vibrant yellow you've got on today.
I can hear the birds chirping outside the door. I figured, okay, put some bright colours on to be spring-like. So here we go.
It does make me laugh in the UK that any hint of sunshine, and we're out there, aren't we, with the sunglasses, the shorts, the summer wear.
Absolutely. Got to make the most of it.
Exactly. So we met, so to give our listeners context of how we know each other. So you were the fabulous keynote speaker at WTS Fest in London, weren't you?
I was. That was back in, about 6 weeks ago now, right?
Yeah, I mean, life is just a bit of a blur. I don't know about you, but I think it was in February, if I remember rightly. And remind me and tell the audience what the title of your talk was.
So the title of the talk was The Art of the Ask. And it's all about how to ask for things that you want and what kind of questions you should be asking and of who.
Exactly. And I remember, so after you did your talk, obviously we had a conversation and it was a fabulous talk and I felt very inspired. And I loved in your talk as well how it was really engaging as well. You got people to do stuff with their people that they were sitting next to, which I really enjoyed as well. But I just had to get you on the podcast because the art of the ask is a topic that's very relevant to our audience, because you've got to put yourself out there, and you've got to ask questions, and you've got to ask people certain things, but also it's about knowing how to deal with certain answers as well, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that goes down quite well in that particular talk is the time we spend on how to deal with rejection, because so many people don't ask in case they get that no.
And that is possibly one of the biggest reasons, would you say, that people don't ask?
Yeah, I think it's a big one. I think often we don't, certainly, my own career very early on, I just didn't really have enough experience and even confidence to think that I could ask for things. So it wasn't even that I feared rejection, but just I didn't contemplate that I could ask for stuff that I needed. I just thought you just get doled whatever anyone wants to give you, and that's the end of it.
Yeah, and it's because you don't know what you don't know, right? And it's true. Like, I've been in similar situations where something has happened, or I'm in a particular situation, and rather than like asking questions or finding out more, I've just taken that as the situation, and you move on.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so many things come into play here. It could have been the way that you were raised. It could have been that, you've been in an environment before where you weren't encouraged to sort of share your opinions or to share your needs. So conditioning, history, etc., can all play a role in how much we ask for the things that we need to help us.
Exactly. And would you be able to share an experience from your past where you wished you asked questions, and what questions you wish that you would have asked?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, an example of that is very early on in my career. So, in the first corporate role that I had, I hadn't had much work experience apart from working in, shops and things like that when I was a teenager. And so then I got my first corporate job, and I just thought, well, if you keep really quiet and just do the work behind the scenes, then that's good enough to, help you progress. And it was a consulting role. So, of course, as a consultant, you're supposed to speak up. You're supposed to, show people that you have information, valuable information, good ideas. And so, of course, my strategy of just keeping my nose clean and being really quiet in the corner was not a very successful one. And ultimately, what happened was that I got put on probation in that role. And I'd always been somebody who'd worked really hard, really conscientious. So that was quite a shock to me. And, on the one hand, perhaps my manager could have asked a bit more of me and asked me, well, your performance isn't that great. How can we help you? What's next in terms of, what do you need for us to help you move forward? But then on the other hand as well, I mean, it didn't occur to me early in that role to ask my manager, well, what are you looking for? Or if I want to succeed in this role, what should I be doing? Or I don't feel like I'm making much of a contribution. Can I get a bit more developmental feedback from you on a regular basis so that I can, make some progress? So it didn't occur to me to ask any of those sorts of questions at all. So looking back, if I could change anything about that role, I think I would, or that time, I think I would have been asking more questions.
100%. And thank you for being really open and transparent and sharing that sort of experience. And I suppose we've all been in that similar situation where, yeah, we're not asking questions. And even if deep down and in our gut, we can feel that something's not quite right, or we're not performing to the standard that we want, or anything. Because I think sometimes listening to your gut, and if something doesn't feel quite right, or you just want to ask a question, it's about having that confidence to ask questions. And actually, asking questions is okay. And every time that I've asked a question, the person that I've asked that question to, whether it's a manager, a client, anyone who I'm working with on a project, we've then been able to have a really good conversation, but also make sure that we're on the same page as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's if you're in an environment where people don't want to hear your questions, then that's a red flag, I think, in and of
Yeah.
itself, right? So, and quite often it just takes one person. So I think, yeah, going back to my own situation, my manager was quite young. I was very young. Um, he was quite young, and I'd imagine that he just felt super uncomfortable with having a performance conversation with me, which is why he never did. So at least if I'd have started asking, it would have probably freed him up as well to be a little bit more honest and open about my performance and what he was looking for. So I think that whoever it is, sometimes we feel it's not our role to ask first, it should be
Mm-hmm.
somebody else. But you know what, maybe for all sorts of reasons that person feels reluctant. So just grab the ball by the horns and go for it.
And you've got to take charge, right? Only you are in charge of your career and the steps that you take. Obviously, there are some things that are outside of your control, but things that you can control and things that you can influence, you've got to be proactive, right? You've got to be the one who is asking those questions, being proactive, suggesting, because if you don't and you just keep quiet and carry on doing what you're doing, you don't know how you're performing. You don't know if you're even in the right sort of direction, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's I mean, I know that in that role I was deeply unhappy as well. So even if I mean, when you're feeling unhappy with a situation, that's telling you something. It's telling you that there's some kind of action required, maybe on your part, or that the circumstance has to change. And so, the easiest or one strategy, I guess, for helping things change is by asking. Because you could go in and say, "This is dreadful. This shouldn't be happening." Blah blah blah, etc. But asking is a more gentle way of unearthing, what problems might be, or a way of getting to the bottom of things without making people wrong or without kind of being excessively demanding. So even a well-placed question, even if you know what's wrong, right, or you know where you're trying to get to with this, but you ask a question instead, that can often be taken in a much more sometimes it's not seen as so challenging when people ask as when they say, right, this is wrong, this needs to change.
Exactly. And it's about opening the conversation, and also practice makes perfect. Or hang on. No, practice makes progress. I've stumbled across that, where the usual saying is practice makes perfect, where a better way to say is practice makes progress. And I think the more familiar and the more practiced you are at asking questions, the more it will become habitual, and the more that you'll feel less scared and actually empowered to ask questions, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, and I really like that sort of reframe of that expression, because all too often we feel like we should get it perfectly right. And it's so funny because when I do this talk, I often give people a feedback form to fill out afterwards to let me know how the content went down. And there's always one or two people that say things like, Shola, give me the exact language to use so that I always get a yes from every question. And it's like, well, hold on. And I think I said this in the talk, this is not magic. It's just communication skills. So there's so many other factors involved, like the context, your relationship with the person, all sorts of things. You might be asking for something and there's just no resource there to give you. So however well you ask, the answer is always going to be no. So just this idea of asking questions to make some progress, just flushing things out is a progress. You might still get a no, but
Mm-hmm.
at least now there's clarity for everyone concerned.
Right, Shola, this first half has been such a great conversation. We're going to take a short break now, but after the break, I'd really love to pick your brains and get some really actionable strategies from you that our listeners can start implementing to help them ask questions. Does that sound good?
Yeah, that sounds amazing, Sarah.
Wonderful. All right. So join us for part 2. Shola, are you still with us?
I'm still here.
So we said to our listeners that part 2 is all about arming them with practical strategies that they can implement to help them start asking questions. So over to you.
Yeah. So I want to give you a couple of, well, actually 3 different things to keep in mind. So the first one is, and these are specific asking strategies. So the first one is how to ask for a mentor. And a lot of people, would love to have a mentor, but if you go to somebody and you say, "Oh, can you please be my mentor?" quite often they'll say no, because it just sounds like it's a lot of responsibility and effort, and everyone today is so busy. So from a book called Unapologetically Ambitious by a woman called Shelley Archambault, who was a tech CEO, she talks about a strategy for asking, she calls it the mentor adoption strategy. And so she talks about, if there's someone in your organization or even somebody in the wider world, perhaps you follow on LinkedIn or wherever, and you would love them to give you some advice, then what you do is you do your research on them, and then you approach them and you say, I love your content, or I love that you did X, Y, and Z the other day, or I saw you in that meeting, I loved what you said. Can I ask you a question? And then you ask them something very specific that you genuinely want their advice on. And so then when they give you the advice, you say, "Oh, thank you so much, that's great." And you go and you put it into practice. And so then when you've got some results, you then return to that person and you say, "Oh, thank you so much for your advice last time. This is what I did. This is how it worked." And then they will likely feel really pleased that you took their advice. And then at that point, you can say to them, "Well, I've got another question. Do you mind?" And so although they're not your formal mentor, they're still in this position where they're giving you advice and giving you sort of strategies and so on. So that is one way that you can get people to help you who perhaps you wouldn't normally dare to approach. So yeah, that's one strategy. The second asking strategy is what is called the presumptive ask. And this is where you just assume or presume that the response is a favorable one. And so this would be something like, let's say you work for a company and you're looking for a promotion. You might say to your manager, "So what would it take for me to get promoted in 3 months' time?" So instead of you saying, "Oh, is my performance good enough to be promoted?" you're saying, "What would it take?" And so you're presuming that you have the skills, the know-how, the whatever it is to be promoted, but you just need a little bit of the edge, from your manager giving you these extra tips. So this can be really helpful, because what's happening then is, instead of you asking them to decide yes or no, you're actually encouraging them to co-create the solution with you and to actually help you advance. So that can be a really good one, especially if it's a tricky situation, or they might have some information that you don't have. And so you're now enrolling them to be on your team to support you. The third strategy is, so the third one is, this one is to make your requests a bit more juicy. And quite often in the workplace, we tend to strip away emotion from requests that we're making, because we feel that it's inappropriate to sort of use emotion to help us. But quite often, if you share a reason or share a feeling attached to your request, that is much more compelling for the person than just a very dry kind of ask. So, for example, you might be approaching somebody for, I don't know, let's say a pay rise, right? So you might be, pay rise is a tough one. Let's say you want to work in a different team or something for a while. So you might be saying, "You know what, I've been feeling over the last few months that I've really got a lot stronger in this particular role. I've developed some new skills. I'm really feeling very confident. And with that confidence, I just love to try my hand at a bigger challenge or a different project. So I'm wondering if it's possible for me to join Project ABC for 3 months." And I think if I got to join Project ABC, that would really advance my skills. It would really let me see, what impact I can have in this company. And I think I'd find it really exciting and very motivating. And it would just help me, add even more to what's going on here in the team and in the role. So I wonder if that's possible. So breaking that down, I didn't do a great job there, but the point is, you start with how you're feeling about the situation, and then you make your ask, and then you talk about how you would feel if you got the thing that you're asking for. And so the two sets of feelings, it's like a feeling sandwich with the ask in the middle, just help the person to think, oh yeah, I can see they're really excited, or they're enthusiastic, or they're this, that, and the other, rather than, well, I'd like to, because it doesn't give people a lot to kind of hang on to if you don't give them the emotional aspect. So there's three little frameworks that you can use for asking.
Amazing, amazing. I can definitely see myself implementing all three of them. So, with the emotion and making sure that you reflect how you're feeling, should it always be a positive emotion?
That's a good question. I think there's times where it might not be a positive one. Yeah, I mean, for example, if you need a mental health break, right, you might be talking about what you've been going through, or the stresses of the role, or whatever, and then you make your request, and then you might say, well, if I get this break, then I feel afterwards this is how I'm going to come back to the office, and this is the contribution I'm going to make. So yeah, I don't see why you can't put in, sort of some more negative emotions in the right place.
Yeah, I suppose it's all about context and what your question is and why, and also just being a bit mindful about your boundaries as well, because obviously you've got to be comfortable talking about certain things that you feel comfortable with your boss. So if that is all aligned, then yeah, I can see how that works. A question that I feel like I really need to ask is, and we alluded to it earlier, about rejection. So yeah, how would you suggest our listeners best prepare for that?
Yeah, so I think you can prepare in a number of ways. So I think you can think a few steps ahead. I don't play chess, but people always talk about how you sort of think a few steps ahead. So if first of all, think of the reasons why they might say no, and then think about what would happen if they did say no. What's going to be your plan B, right? Because, for example, you might decide, okay, I've asked my manager, they've said no, but maybe there's somebody else I can ask. So it might be that you start to cultivate relationships with other people in case you don't get the response that you wanted. So you do have alternatives. Also, some people, when they get a no, they get terribly tense. They get really upset, frustrated. And so for some people, just this idea of relaxing after hearing a no can be really transformative. And recognizing that there is life after the no, it's not going to ruin everything. And another major one that I think is so important is return. Because all too often when we get a no from somebody, it's like, right, that's the end. I'm never talking to them again. Or you see them and you kind of look away, or you feel embarrassed or whatever. And I remember at the SEO, Women in SEO, in Tech SEO, I said to people that you shouldn't base the way that you view yourself on somebody else's response to your no, to your request, because if anything, you should be patting yourself on the back and saying, you know what, I had the guts to ask. This time I didn't get what I wanted, but I'm going to go from strength to strength here because I did the thing. I did the difficult thing. Once you've asked and you've got to know, just be prepared to keep the relationship going. Don't act as though you're super upset or you're never going to talk to them again or whatever, because that person might be someone that you return to later on.
Mm.
Maybe you ask them again in 6 months, or you say, well, you've said no now. Can you tell me why? Or, is that no not ever, or is that just no not now? So excuse me, I need a bit of water. But the point is just to keep the relationship going, because you never know when that person might grant you a yes. So don't burn your bridges.
I remember you sharing like an example of that when you were doing your talk, because you were like, someone might reach out to you and you can't facilitate it at that time, and then if they go super quiet or if there's no response when the opportunity then arises, if you've burnt that bridge and you've not even responded, then why should that person spend their time responding to you or like following up with an opportunity? So yeah, I get that there might be a bit of pride that's getting in the way. But I think sometimes you need to put your pride aside and just be like, and respond. Just respond. And yeah.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, because this, you remember the story very well, but when this person who'd asked me to be their mentor, I got back to them and I didn't know them from anywhere, right? So I could have just not ignored their question, but I got back to them and then they completely went silent. And I was thinking, well, are they upset or are they angry? And so then when something did come up that I could have given to them, I thought, oh, you know what? It seems like it's too much hassle to get back in touch with this person. So just keep the lines of communication open. There's no harm in doing that at all.
I love that. I love that. Right. I'm very sorry, Shola, but we are rapidly running out of time. And there are always 3 questions that we squeeze in and we ask all of our guests. Are you ready for them?
Go for it.
What is the main takeaway from this episode?
The main takeaway for me is everyone's going to be rejected at some point. So the main takeaway is ask and return. Ask and return, because that combination, I think, can do nothing but serve you in life.
Could we be as bold and say it's the winning combination?
Why not? Why not?
Best career advice?
Gosh, I think that I was reading Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic the other day. She's the person that wrote Eat, Pray, Love, which was a massive film success a few years back. And she talks about the creative process and that you can either create with a sort of martyr mentality. It's like, oh, this is so hard, I'm suffering, everything's really difficult. Or you can have what she calls a trickster mentality, which is more, right, I'm going to make this playful, easy. And a lot of that is about how you approach things. So at the moment, with where I am in my particular career, I'm just thinking about kind of having a trickster mentality and just treating things with lightness and with fun rather than with too much seriousness.
I've never heard of that before and I love it. I love the trickster. And it's that shift in mindset, isn't it? And actually embracing it and being like, how wonderful. I get to do all these wonderful things. I get to take on a challenge, right? And yeah, I love that. I absolutely love that. And then my last question is someone awesome to follow right now and why?
Books by this a guy called Oliver Berkman, who writes about productivity, but in a kind of different way. So he's got a book called, I think it's called 4,000 Weeks. And it's about the fact, if you read that,
it's on my list. It's on my list.
Okay, it's great. So it's about if you reach 80, you will have been on the earth for about 4,000 weeks. So it's about how do you use your 4,000 weeks if you're privileged enough to have all that many weeks. How do you use them well and in a way that's productive without being kind of glued to, like the mouse on the treadmill, trying to use every spare moment to get things done. So that there's a lot there in that book. Lots of like really great nuggets to take away.
Amazing. Well, I'm very sorry that is the end of our conversation, but can I just say a huge thank you for coming on the podcast, having this conversation with me and sharing your wonderful knowledge, experience and strategies around the power of the ask.
Thank you, Sarah. It's been a real pleasure. It's been great to chat to you. I've really enjoyed this half an hour. Thanks so much.
Amazing. It's gone too fast, hasn't it? Too fast. And before we wrap up, just a reminder of how you can support the podcast. So if you like what me and Tazmin are doing, we are set up on Buy Me a Coffee, so you can give us a one-off donation. Link in the show notes to do that. And also, next time you're listening to an episode, make sure that you are subscribed on that platform. And if you're feeling extra generous, you could also leave us a cheeky review. Right. That is it. That is time. And the only thing left to say is look after yourselves. And until next time.